if you look in the 19th century at one of the greatest physicists that ever lived, James Clerk Maxwell, Maxwell was a Christian, actually an evangelical Christian, a theist, and he gave us Maxwell's equations, which we use to have things like radio and television. The great discoveries of physics in the early 20th century flowed directly out of Maxwell's work. So this is a world-class, influential scientist, not a minor figure at all. His conception of science was that God designed and built the regularities of physics as part of his creation. So Maxwell was working in what we can call a theistic conception of science. That changes dramatically with the Darwinian revolution. People like T.H. Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, a zoologist and scientist of the Darwinian era from the mid-19th century right on through to the end of that century, worked very hard with a group of younger scientists to change the nature of science itself, really to change its ground rules so that all explanation in science had to be rendered ultimately in terms of natural processes, where natural is the contrast class to intelligent, or let's say mind-based explanation. So really what happens is quite interesting. The toolkit of scientific explanation gets smaller. For James Clerk Maxwell, intelligence was a part of his understanding of nature. In particular, the intelligence of God himself was part of Maxwell's understanding of nature. That tool of explanation is taken out of the toolbox of science, and science then becomes characterized by naturalism, which is the philosophy that says the ultimate layer of reality is not mind, it's not God's intellect in particular, but rather physics, particles in motion. And that is what gives rise to everything that we see, including not just physical objects like planets and stars and galaxies and so forth, but cells and animals and ultimately human beings. And everything about us, not just our physical bodies, but in fact our sense of moral categories, our sense of right and wrong, even our spiritual experience is, if it's real or not, but it's ultimately based on of this physical layer. That, I think, needs to be carefully and cleanly distinguished from science itself. Science itself doesn't tell us that the world is strictly natural. In other words, that there was no mind involved, no intellect involved, no creativity in our origin. That's a philosophy. And I think a great obstacle for many people and many Christians is that they have come to identify the enterprise of science, which in its original Latin meaning means knowledge. The original Latin, scientia, means knowledge. Knowledge itself could include the reality of things like intelligence or creativity from a divine mind. So naturalism is a philosophy that I think is false, actually, that has taken over scientific explanation. And a large part of what I do professionally is to try to pull those apart so that people can see that scientific explanation does not require a naturalistic understanding of reality. So frankly, this may seem like old-fashioned language, but I think naturalism holds science in bondage. It's like having a ball and chain around your ankle, and you need to get a very nice hacksaw and cut that chain off and let it go, and recover the original, and I think a tremendously fruitful mode of explanation that includes intelligent design in the toolkit of science, where it once existed.